How do I create good sales copy? Hi, Massimo here, and this is another question that one of my group members wrote when it was asked him to join my Facebook group. And yes, I remember that I was always good in writing, in the when I was at school. I had to do written compositions and so on in Italian language, about topics and so on. I remember that I was one of the best in my classroom. I had almost always the highest notes, because I was one who was reading a lot, especially fantasy books, martial arts and fantasy books, and I was really the teachers and then the professors were seeing that I was quite talented in writing, and they made additional efforts in order to make so that I could write better and so on. Not only grammatically, which is not the case of the English language, because I am anyway still learning and so on, perfecting and so on, but in Italian language I am quite good. I am very good. Okay, so basically what I learned, the majority of the things that I learned about writing was when I was in the middle school and in the high schools. And I remember that I was one of those students who were writing pages and pages and pages. Of course, I didn't start like this, but I was just learning, being corrected from the teacher and so on. And I remember I had two particular Italian teachers who were really, really very good ones. The second teacher in the high school started not only correcting me in my grammar errors, okay, but also and especially in the form, on how I was creating my compositions. And I remember that once she told me, Massimo, when you are writing, I can see that you have a lot to say when you're writing, but the way you write is not quite flowing, There is a certain kind of structure that you have to understand, which is composed from two main subjects, if we can say so. You have to understand that when you write something, especially in a composition, you have to watch the title, what is requested. Okay, for example, if we are speaking about books, okay, and then you have to answer to the title. But when you answer to the title, the first structure that you have to understand and follow is this one. And I was like, yeah, which one? She was speaking to me, but she was speaking to the whole classroom, But anyway, being the one who was writing the most, she was speaking with me at that time. And then she told me, you have to understand that there are 3 phases, 3 steps when you write a composition. The first one is the presentation, when you present the topic that you are speaking about. Okay? Introduction. The first step is introduction. You have to introduce, okay, and to introduce the topic you are speaking about, okay, and make it clear so that the person can understand, okay, we are speaking about this thing and so on, and the people is not confused about what you are writing. Okay, teacher. Then The second step is development, which is the largest amount of the composition. You introduce the topic, and then you develop your thoughts in the development section, which is the second section of a composition. And you write all what you observed, what the conclusions, and so on. But not the conclusion. You write what you observed, what happened, and so on and so forth. And then the third part, when you, in order to finish, there is the conclusion, where you finish speaking about, you summarize everything, and you find a way to close the whole composition. So you just see the track, you read the track, see what is asked in the track, then you answer to the track with your composition, and your composition must be built in this way: introduction, about the topic, about your answer, development, and conclusion. Okay, and then I started doing this and so on. So now I had a track, and I was like, I was really improving incredibly, now that I could understand how it worked, and I was like, oh wow, cool. And I was getting good notes, better notes, and so on. It was quite cool, because now finally I could explain myself and so on. But there were some problems more, because I was like, when she told me this, all the confusion about writing just blown away, and I was like, this is the way, it makes sense, and this is the way how I had to write a composition. Okay, so I started playing with it, and then I understood that there were some little problems. Even if I knew about the structure of how to write a composition, the teacher told me, okay, you improved a lot and so on, but you are a little bit confused. There is something that you didn't grasp totally, and so on. I go, yeah, I'm doing what you said, teacher. He said introduction, I do the introduction. You said development, I developed the topic, and then a conclusion, I do the conclusion. Okay, so what is happening now? I don't understand. And she told me, when you write, this is the structure: introduction, development, and conclusion. But you have to understand that you have to make so that people understand clearly what you are speaking about. It is not enough that you know the structure, but you have to answer to some fundamental questions. The fundamental questions are the 5 journalists' questions. The 5 journalist questions. And I say, which one? Which ones are these questions? Oh, I said it in Italian, then I translate. Chi, dove, quando, come, perché. Who, where, when, how, and why. I remember. And things started. I understood something that was like when the clouds go away, and the sky is clean. Earlier, before this, of the first thing that she told me, there were a lot of clouds in my sky, when I was writing. Then she told me the structure, introduction, development, and conclusion. And then she told me about the 5 journalist questions, and the sky then was totally clear from the last clouds, and I was like, cool. And I started then using this scheme: introduction, development, so on. But then I had to understand how to use the question, where to use the question. So then I figured it out the first time, second time, third time, then I understood that. When I was in the introductions, I had to speak about who, about when, and about where. So the people could have the total pictures with these three questions. And then the how and why were the answers, were the questions to which I had to answer to in the development section. And then the conclusion was just a summarizing of everything, of the first three questions, second two questions, all summarized with the conclusion. What was my thinking about the whole situation once that I developed the composition? And it was quite cool, because then I was the one who had always the best notes in Italian composition, and it was cool. Now, what does this have to do with sales copy? Sales copy is copy, which means basically text, written text or spoken text. It is text, just to be simple, to be clear. And sales, about sales. So sales copy is something which written it is the text used in something written on something, or in a video, or in an audio file or record, which makes so that the people who is listening or reading it or watching it then is convinced to buy something. So the best way to do this is simply using this kind of structure. So basically, when when you do the introduction in a composition, then you have to grab the people's attention. And normally, what I did when I was writing a composition, was writing something which was like a sentence, a statement, which was like started like this, which created an impact. And then I was doing something like, okay, let me explain, or something. For example, I came to the conclusion that not everyone is down to do this, and this, or something like that kind. There are certain kind of person who, whatever you do, behaves always in this way. And then people is, why? With a question. Normally I started the introduction of the introduction with a question, so that I could grab the attention of the person. And this is what is called hook. I just hooked the teacher attention with the statement and then the question, why? And then I started introducing it using a story where I was introducing who was or where the people inside the story, where it happened, and when it happened. Okay, so that I just was doing this introduction, and then I was explaining what was happening, how was happening, and why it was happening. And the why was including why the people were thinking this was happening. And then in the conclusions I was writing why I thought, with summarizing why I thought that thing was happening. Normally I was writing the why in the development, general why that thing was happening, and then in the conclusion there was my personal why. Then summarizing who, where, when, how, and why, but this time why, and then my why. Okay, and this was closing everything. And every time that I was writing this, the teacher and teachers, everyone who was reading was sold on my vision of the fact, because I could really I could really say my thoughts. I could really show my emotions and so on. Write about my emotions and so on. Not showing, but write about my emotions and so on, and why my conclusion, and so my why, because the conclusion is my why. Okay, and so why my conclusion was that one. Okay, and they were always delighted. The teachers in the school were just reading this, passing my composition, and they were always delighted to read it. And this was the same that happened when I got the grades. And I remember that there was this teacher telling, all these compositions are similar and so on. And then this teacher, who was classroom representative, our classroom representative, said, "I know that there is this student, Massimo Bruno, who is very good in Italian compositions. Okay, let's read his composition." And they read it. It was about the balance between imagination and reality in writing, and it was just my topic because I was a fan of science fiction and fantasy. It was really something really cool and so on. And I was told that at the end, that one of the teachers in the examination commission said, "And now that we read this composition, what do we do? We will be bored with the composition of the other," because normally, at least here in Italy, all the students, at least for what I remember, all the students, when they do the final examination, they bring with them already ready text, ready copy for their compositions. But I went without because I didn't need it. And then the same teacher said, "Well, when we are bored, we will read again Massimo Bruno's composition." Okay, anyway, this is the general way on how to write a good copy. But there is a specific way that you can use with every kind of sales copy, and specifically for the sales copy, you have to write the story. You have to say the story in a particular way, in a certain way, okay, which is parallel for of what I said you in this video, but there is specifically precisely tailored for selling. Okay, so if you want to know how to write great sales copy, just do what I did, because I recognize this kind of structure thanks to what I learned in my school and high school, but I didn't know how to use this for selling. Okay, and I discovered and learned how to do this for selling, and how to modify and how exactly to put the different pieces of the structure in the One Funnel Away challenge. And if you want to learn how to do a great sales copy, and so that you can sell better, convert your leads into buying customers, just do the One Funnel Away challenge. How do you do the One Funnel Away challenge? What is the One Funnel Away challenge? You can get all information clicking on the link, which can be up, down, everywhere, or just post on my on this a comment on this in this post, or just send me a personal message on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you are watching this video. And if you don't find the link, you will get an answer from me, so that you can get all the informations and how to join the One Funnel Away challenge. Okay, this is just one little part of this stuff, sales copy, how to write a good sales copy.